So we can give patients today, consumers, a whole bunch of surface information that without that layer of biomarker analysis just creates anxiety or it becomes a wellness product that really doesn't help anyone manage their health. So we think that GSense is positioning itself as the truth layer between the surface biomarkers and the clinical action. We are telling you why your heart rate is spiking. We're telling you why your kidney function is moving, trending upwards or downwards. And we think that that is a great place to be innovating today.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us here, Dr. Pierpauli, Dr. Luis Pierpauli from Science Biotech. I'm Avanish from Health Engine. It would be great if you could just give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself before we move on with the rest of the questions.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I'm Louis Pierpauli. I'm Dr. Louis Pierpauli. I'm the co-founder and CEO of GSense Biotech, a nanotechnology and biotechnology company developing new and novel diagnostic devices for chronic diseases.
Wow. Yeah. It's incredible, and we're really grateful to have you as a part of the cohort X of Health Engine. Um,
I'm delighted
yeah.
to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Just starting off with the first question. What motivated you to start GSense?
Well, that is a great question. It goes back a little bit to about 10 years ago. I had a very personal relationship with chronic diseases. Um, by the time I was 33, I'd lost both my parents to chronic disease. And I realized that even with all the tools that medicine had at its disposal at the time, the quality of life for patients was really bad. And part of it had to do with how, when you have a chronic condition, it becomes the center of your life. And I felt that something needed to be done. At the time, I didn't know what. But later on, I understood that there was a massive gap in diagnostics and monitoring because it was all centralized in centralized labs like LabCorp or Quest. And that tethers people with chronic conditions to these facilities. And it's not it's not good for quality of life. It's not good for healthcare results. So I set up to do something about it.
Yeah, wow. It's incredible. Like to think that, you know, we have some sort of vision for healthcare, but that there's always something that's lacking, and that there's always something that we can do to make it better is something I think that's inspirational for us people at Health Engine as well. And it's great to see that there's other people in the industry doing the same. I did want to ask you about like your growing up in Argentina, how that influenced anything in specific, and then I also know that you transferred to McKinsey for a while before you came to GSEN. So if you could give us a little bit of an overview of that, that would also be really interesting for us.
Yeah. I grew up in Argentina. I was born in Argentina to Italian parents. Um, and I grew up in Argentina. I went to school there. And it informed a lot my vision of the patients. You know, when you go to medical school, you see a prototypical patient. You never talk about the patients who might be underrepresented, who might have a difficult economical time, um, and you don't understand how different healthcare is for those people. But growing up in Argentina, which is a country that's great, but it's very limited in resources, I was able to see firsthand how doctors and patients did a lot with a lot less. And when I came here to the States, I saw the abundance of resources, but really the same problems. So it informed my decision in terms of, well, it's not a matter of resources, it's a matter of how we allocate those resources. And that became clear when I transitioned to McKinsey, where I was essentially working at the earliest stages of value based care contracts. At the time, they were not as common and popular. We were working on that for specific clients. And it was revolutionary how they were based on outcomes. It was not a transaction anymore where a physician sees you and they get paid just for that, and I mean just for that in the sense of the transaction, it became more about, well, how is this physician treating you? What are the outcomes they're getting? Are they good? Is your quality of life better? Do we see less hospitalizations? And that I saw at the time that that was going to become the norm. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer than I had anticipated, but I'm happy that now it is becoming the norm.
Wow, yeah. I think, like, at least for people going into healthcare, that's always like the sort of the trend that they're trying to move towards. So it's I think it's really interesting to see like the sorts of different avenues by which you can go about this. Like first being a doctor, and then also thinking about the healthcare industry as a whole, and how you can keep moving in the direction that you want it to go to. Um, yeah, I'd like to transition a little bit over to GSENS itself. And I know that GSENS uses graphene technology, and so that's something I was curious about personally. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that. And also, like once you identified that this technology exists, how did you actually go about implementing it through creating your own startup?
Yeah, that is a terrific question, and the technology is remarkably interesting. I'll try to be. I'll go from the broader aspects of it to the more technical part of it, because I know you have a very diverse audience. So probably people want to hear the nuts and bolts of it, but also understand how the basics of it work. So essentially, one of my co-founders had been working in graphene transistors for about 20 years. He's been consistently ranked in the top 2% by Stanford University globally. So he's one of the folks that's, I would say, arguably one of the top 20 minds in biosensor research. And he had been beating on this drum that graphene was the next barrier for biosensors. And the reason why he said that is because graphene, in its true form, it's a 2D material. It's like a sheet of paper. And basically, in contrast with silicon, which is a bulk material like a 3D dice, basically, in graphene, you can, through a process, decorate, for lack of a better word, the surface of the sensor with biorecognition elements. And imagine an antibody. And when that antibody finds its target, it'll change the electrical properties all over that 2D sheet of graphene. And because it's so thin, the resonance of the signal is huge. Whereas if you were using silicon or a bulk material, it takes a lot more energy to actually make the signal propagate through the bulk material. So that was the principle, the physical principle that my co-founder was studying, and he had done amazing work and proof of concept in really disparate uses, never in human health. So when we met about, I've known him for about 14 years. So we met at a party about 7 years ago, and he was telling me about this technology. My question was, can it be deployed for medical use? And he was really excited. He said, yes, absolutely, but we need a chemical engineer and we need an electrical engineer to build the hardware. So we set out to look for all those people. We brought them into the company, we made them founders, and we started building the product from scratch with the biosensor as the heart of the technology, the electronic reader as sort of like, I would say, the guts of it, and then a layer of software that lets patients interact with this device. And so I think I give you a little bit more information than you asked, um, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that are trying to go into the startup world, it's always a little bit like there's a lot of uncertainty, right? And I think having more information is often much better than having less of it. It gives you a sense of direction that you might not have had in the past. Yeah, I think it's incredible that GSense is doing what it's doing, and I think one of the like related questions I had was in terms of the field itself that GSense is a part of. How do you see the at-home health field evolving in the coming years, and what do you think are like some of the biggest challenges it faces today?
Wow, I love that question, man. That's like I could spend the next 2 hours talking about this. I promise you this is my favorite topic. Um, I think that Jason's started in this movement of trying to bring healthcare into the home, because we understood that the home will be the hub for healthcare delivery in the future. And and it's interesting if you look at the macro trends very carefully, you'll start seeing these little tips, this little many trends that are pointing towards a reality that we haven't thought of. Think about this: your AirPods, they're just your AirPods. No, they're not now. They can be a hearing aid. So a company like Apple decided we're going to turn AirPods that play music into a hearing aid because they want to be able to develop solutions that get into the healthcare realm direct to consumer. It's what we call the consumerization of healthcare. You have your Apple Watch that tracks your heart rate. You have the Whoops, the Fitbits, and all of that is showing that the patients are really interested in knowing what's happening with their body. They really want that information. And the problem is that all the information that we can provide today is surface information. We can tell you what your heart rate is, but if we truly want to know why your heart rate is elevated, we need to run a blood test. And for that, you need to go to a centralized lab. So we can give patients today, consumers, a whole bunch of surface information that without that layer of biomarker analysis just creates anxiety or it becomes a wellness product that really doesn't help anyone manage their health. So we think that GSense is positioning itself as the truth layer between the surface biomarkers and the clinical action. We are telling you why your heart rate is spiking. We're telling you why your kidney function is moving, trending upwards or downwards. And we think that that is a great place to be innovating today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, at least for me, something I always try to think about is, like, in the '60s, doctors would go to the people's homes to care for them, right? But obviously, in a day like today, we don't have the resources nor the infrastructure, or the system in place for that to continue happening. So I guess like the next best thing is to develop technologies that still allow patients to have control of their health at home. Well, even if you can't have doctors come in, one on one. Um,
And let me just
yeah,
say this,
yeah,
to your point, not only that, but the population has changed dramatically. Like
right.
when kidney dialysis was invented, which kidney dialysis is it's the best form of treatment aside from a transplant for patients suffering from kidney disease. When this was invented, it applied to about 30,000 patients. That patient population has grown today to over 500,000 patients. And treating end stage kidney disease takes 1.5% of the entire federal budget. So not only the tools have changed, the population has changed, and we are unfortunately, as a society, uh, sicker than ever because we haven't invested properly in preventative healthcare. So the population has increased so much that doing house calls like it was in the past, it would be physically impossible today just by the sheer number of patients that we have.
Yeah. I guess just building on top of that, what do you think is your long term vision for GSense?
That's a good question. We have I okay, let me put my founder hat on, which is when I dream big, we dream that GSense will become a platform of at home testing. So, kind of like what happens to all of us when we get an Apple product, you get an iPhone and it works greatly and you love it. And then you get a MacBook and it's connected to your iPhone. And then you get an iPad and all of a sudden you realize that your entire home is packed with Apple products because you are embedded in this ecosystem that works so well. We want to replicate that. We want to develop cartridges, testing cartridges for people with kidney disease, people with heart disease, people battling cancer. And all of a sudden, because all of these diseases coexist sometimes in the same patient, our dream is that one patient will have one single G-Sense device and multiple cartridges. And that patient will be embedded in a testing ecosystem that basically allows him or her to test for their multiple diseases from home and in real time. That is the real dream.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely want to see that happen. Yeah. I guess I guess like knowing that there are so many things to do in this space. There's so many things that GSense is already doing. I'm curious, what sort of obstacles have you encountered trying to get this implemented into people's homes, and what sort of obstacles do you anticipate encountering in the near future?
That is a that is a great question because I think that the obstacles are they were the one thing that surprised us the most, believe it or not. Um, when we started, we thought that the biggest problem was going to be technical. We thought that the technology was going to take a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of resources to get to a point where it was workable. And that was a mistake. That was an early mistake. And I urge any founders or entrepreneurs that are starting, if they think that the technology is going to be the problem, I promise you it will not. That is one of the first things that you'll figure out. I think that the problem became uh, it was on one hand fundraising because you had to convince investors of a vision that you were seeing from a standpoint where you had way more access to information than them. You have spoken to in our case, we had spoken to 150 doctors. We had spoken to over 200 patients. Insurance company, we'd spoken to like 20. So it was difficult to distill all of that research into a fundraising narrative that took a while. And I think the other large obstacle is still the coding system and reimbursement system in America. It is some things are being done that are great. There's now a program called Access that allows ACOs and payviders to adopt technologies that don't have CPT codes, but getting a CPT code, which is a reimbursement code for the physician and the provider to get paid when they prescribe this device, is an incredibly expensive thing to do, and it takes a really long time. And that was an obstacle that um, became even harder with time, and that's something that we've been focusing on for a while now.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, I think CPT codes are something that we also in Health Engine are talking about quite a bit. And it happens to be an obstacle for quite a bit of healthcare startups, just because there's already so much healthcare infrastructure in place, and having to create your own sort of pathway in such a large system is always difficult. Um, but in the same vein of understanding like different obstacles within this industry, how do you think the presence of artificial intelligence in the past 5 or so years has impacted your development of GSense?
I think it was I think it was very impactful in a way that's very non-obvious. Um, one of the critiques, and I'm opening up here. One of the critiques that is generally levied against graphene transistors is that they are difficult to replicate. They're difficult to manufacture. They're difficult to replicate. So there's a lot of variability in the measurements, and that is true. That is absolutely true. And we had fixed that through hardware. We developed an anti-fouling layer, which is basically a layer of materials that prevent um, non-specific interactions, and it cost a lot of money, and it was working very well. But we had we hired two AI engineers for our team last year, and they figured out that if we tested all of the sensors that we manufactured in a certain batch, we were able to map the, for lack of a better word, the imperfections on each sensor And basically, with that map, we could eliminate the noise in the measurement by knowing the imperfections. And that was done with AI. And it took the sensitivity and the performance of our sensors, it 3x'd it in a matter of 2 months. We published an article back in December last year in Biosensors and Bioelectronics, where we were detecting hepatitis E. And we show the progression of how we started with an 87% sensitivity and we're reaching 100% sensitivity by the end of it just by leveraging and just by tweaking the AI part. So it was incredibly useful, but again, it was in a very non-obvious way.
Yeah, wow. I think in particular, yeah, like just having the existence of this new technology can cause like a feeling of uncertainty for a lot of people that are trying to adopt it, right? But I think once you start actually using it, um, it can reveal to be a lot more useful than you might have thought it once was, because it feels just so foreign at first glance. But yeah, I think we've developed through this conversation a pretty good understanding of GSINs, and I know there's so much more I could ask you. But I did want to pivot this conversation a little bit towards Berkeley, and so I know you have some experience with Berkeley Skydeck, and so I wanted to ask you about your experience with that program.
Yeah, I thought it was a really really good program. Um, it covers all of the training that basically any entrepreneur should have, and it packages it in a short format that's digestible, and it basically still allows you to keep working on the company. Because one of the biggest problems is when you want to go through a program and get trained, you don't want it to be so intense that they don't let you run your company. And that was one of the greatest things that I remember from that program. Um, I remember I want to also call out a friend, someone who I call a friend right now, George Panagiotakopoulos. He was our program leader at the time, and he is this incredibly resourceful guy. He has a lot of connections and is one of those people that he will open up his network to you. And that was arguably one of the most valuable things that we took from the program. Um, and it was partly thanks to him. So every time I get an opportunity to call him out and give him a shout out, I do because he's not only a great professional, but he became a great friend for some of the startups as well.
Wow, yeah, I connections do go a long way for sure. Yeah, again like pivoting towards Health Engine. What are the sorts of things that you've seen in the Health Engine that you'd say might have benefited you so far? And what are some things that you think Health Engine could keep offering you to keep helping GSENs and other startups in our cohort?
Yeah, I think that Health Engine does something very, very well. Um, and it is what I call white glove treatment. Um, I have spoken to many people within the Health Engine team, and everyone is very helpful. But you have this thing where you have your point of contact, which in my case is Shreya, and that having that point of contact, having that person that you can reach to that will facilitate access to resources, that is one of the smartest things I have ever heard. And to be completely fair, that's something that Skydeck doesn't have. That's something that Y Combinator doesn't have. That's something very unique to Health Engine, and it makes the whole experience feel like white glove treatment because you have your point of contact. And I've reached out to her and had an introduction with an investor, had an introduction with a leading physician in the space. Um, she even invited me to this podcast too. So I think that Health Engine does that very well, and the way that they can keep helping companies like GSense is by staying involved. It's the funniest thing is you talk to the people at Health Engine, and opportunities just show up, and Prithvi is a remarkably resourceful guy. I really admire the way that he's doing this. Honestly, you all are doing a great job. But when I applied to Health Engine, I was expecting it to be really, really good, but it has far surpassed all of my expectations. So I'm definitely happy. This was arguably the best decision at the beginning of the year. So definitely
Wow. That's
love it.
that's really great to hear. And yeah, Shreya is great. And it's it's something that we always try and think about is as a point person, we want to do like the absolute best job that we can do for our founders. Um, whether that be like, the portal towards our other resource networks, connecting to anyone else that we can. Yeah, so that's really great to hear. So I just have one last question before we start wrapping things up, and that's you mentioned we started off by talking about your background and going from different areas of healthcare. So I wanted to ask for members of Health Engine who are currently undergraduates, often underclassmen in at UC Berkeley, something we always thinking about is like what sort of avenue we want to take with healthcare. We're all passionate about it, but we don't always know what we want to do exactly. So we have a lot of pre-meds. We have people that want to go straightly into VC, other people that are more focused on biotech. And so um, personally as well, it's a little difficult for me to like make a choice. I'm interested in so many things, but I also know that I can't do everything all at once. I don't have infinite time, right? So I wanted to hear your thoughts and if you had any recommendations on how to go about like identifying what it is that you truly want to start off doing.
Yeah, I think that the or at least the best way that I found um, to figure out my way in life was you have to know quote unquote evil to recognize good. So you have to do a lot of things, um, and you have to understand whether you like what you're doing or not. I think I'm going to steal this phrase from Steve Jobs. He used to say, "If you find yourself not wanting to do something for an extended period of time, you should stop because that's not what you're supposed to be doing." So in my case, I liked medicine a lot, but it didn't give me that feeling, that those butterflies in the stomach that I thought it would. And I think that the hardest thing to do is to accept that, because we see our careers as time invested. And if you spent like 8 years in medical school, you don't want to think like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. So I would say working out, trying to find internships, trying to find work in different areas so that you can know what you like. By contrast, what you also don't like. And that way you will find the thing that you love. So I would say if you're passionate about technology, I would argue that you would have to look for work in areas where you can transform technology into something tangible. Because I think that the trap that we're going to see now in the future is with AI and with robotics, it's going to be really easy to sketch things in your mind and in your computer, but it's going to be harder to, or the people that win are going to be the ones that can turn them into physical products. So I think that if you're into innovation, arguably you want to be in a space where you can turn your innovation very quickly into a product. Um, and in medicine, I want to tell pre-meds and medical students, medicine is not the only avenue. Practicing medicine is not the only avenue. It's great, but you can be a consultant. You can work at a pharma company developing new drugs. Um, you can work for the government researching. So I think there's a lot to do, and I am absolutely happy to for people to reach out to me and ask any of those questions. I'll be happy to share my thoughts.
Thank you so much.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. That was amazing, man.
Yeah.